So yeah, I became a radical feminist after reading Mary Daly's book Gynecology in 2010. And then in 2013, I had a look online to see if there was any other women who were into this radical feminist thing, and discovered the online RadFem community. That was great, and discovered the issue of female erasure and the rolling back of our sex-based rights. And I didn't need a lot of convincing. It was pretty clear to me that this was something that women would have to fight. I didn't participate in a lot of activism over the 10 years between 2013 and now, mostly just sharing memes and articles and signing petitions. But I censored all of my Facebook posts so that people who lived in my local area couldn't see anything that would be described as slightly turfy, because I didn't want the anti-feminist backlash in my local community. But I've been fully out and proud as a real feminist for over a month now. It's gotten that bad that I can no longer justify any level of self-censorship. The women in my community deserve to hear my voice so that they feel they can also speak. I'm sure that I don't have anything new to say that hasn't already been said, but I'm here and I'm bloody angry. And the speech that I gave at the Let Women Speak event in Brisbane the other week was a really fiery and angry speech, and I had intended to not do that here. But let's just see how we go, eh? What I want to speak about today concerns Article 1 of the Women's Declaration, reaffirming that women's rights are based upon the category of sex. Also Article 4, reaffirming women's right to freedom of expression and opinion. And Article 5, reaffirming women's right to freedom of peaceful assembly and opinion. And Article 6, reaffirming women's right to political participation on the basis of sex. And Article 8, reaffirming the need for the elimination of violence against women. So for me, the biggest issue is words and their meanings. Language is our main form of communication. Words have to mean specific things so that we can communicate with each other effectively. Nouns are not social clubs, and neither are adjectives. Words and their meanings are supposed to accurately reflect the reality that they are meant to convey. The postmodern anti-woman left, and I will call them anti-woman, as they are opposed to women's rights and they insist upon calling us anti-trans. They want to erase all sex-based meaning from language, not just from law and policy. If we were to accept that the word woman and the word female both have a sex-based meaning and an identity-based meaning, as some sham dictionaries are now showing, that's not enough for them. They can never accept the most common shared meanings of those words, which are sex-based, without shrieking about transphobia, as if the very mention, the very acknowledgement that sex exists is a speech crime and a thought crime. I read online the other day somebody saying that it was bigoted to use the words male and female to refer to the sex categories outside of a clinical setting, as if our sex no longer has any political relevance to us, as if sexism no longer exists. This past week, we've seen politicians across the board and the vast majority of the Australian media slander women as Nazis for speaking about their sex-based rights in the public square. We've seen state-sanctioned violence against women in Hobart and today in Auckland by mobs baying for blood. And I say state-sanctioned because the police did not protect those women. I'm so furious. And today I took my fury to the ballot box. I've been a Greens voter my whole life. And today I voted Conservative. And I feel disgusting. But it was either that or draw a big menstruating vulva on my ballot paper. But I didn't want to give my vote away. I wanted to use it. So I did. Yeah. The current left parties need to wake up, or we need a women's party. And I tell you what, I don't know if anybody feels like destiny is calling, but I've never felt like this before. Yeah. In 1984 in Australia, we got the Sex Discrimination Act 4 years after becoming a signatory to the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, known as CEDAW. Article 1 of CEDAW just defines discrimination against women to mean any distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex, which has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on the basis of equality of women and men, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. And sex is defined by the United Nations as the physical and biological characteristics that distinguish males from females. Although who knows? The UN may jump on the postmodern anti-woman bandwagon at any moment, because this is the bizarro world we're living in. If there's anyone new who's watching, please sign the Women's Declaration. It's a reaffirmation of women's sex-based rights as set out in CEDAW. But the Sex Discrimination Act was to fulfill our obligations, in part, after signing that convention. In 2013, the definition of women, a person of the female sex, and the definition of man, a person of the male sex, were deleted from the Federal Sex Discrimination Act. Protections for gender identity were inserted into the Act with no consultation from women's groups. The result is that women no longer exist as a sex category in law in Australia. We have been made unspeakable. Sex has been made unspeakable. Like we needed any more taboos about our bodies. And the most insulting part, the definition of gender identity in the Sex Discrimination Act means the gender-related identity, appearance, or mannerisms, or any other gender-related characteristics of a person, whether by way of medical intervention or not, with or without regard to the person's designated sex at birth. Hello? Gender means the social and cultural roles, stereotypes, and attributes traditionally associated with people on the basis of their sex. Gender is sex role stereotypes. So the female sex and the male sex are deleted from the Sex Discrimination Act, but a bloke with a woman gender identity is definitely a woman because of sex stereotype related identity, sex stereotype related appearance or mannerisms, or other sex stereotype related characteristics. So there we have it. The stereotypes that have been used to oppress us, enshrined in law, and not only that, the law defines us by those stereotypes. Woman is thus long hair and a downward gaze, tits and submission, apparently. Well, I say no. And we're saying no. We're not a costume or a concept or an idea in any man's head. We are the meaning of the word embodied. Speaking of the word gender, I agree wholeheartedly with Mexican radical feminist Laura Lacuna. We need to drop the word gender. It's too vague and meaningless. As Kathleen Stock says in her book, Material Girls, it has at least 4 common meanings, but it has more than that. Probably, I reckon about 40% of the time, people are using it to mean sex. And I reckon about 40% of the time, they have no idea what they mean when they say it. So let's use specific and accurate language. Let's use plain language. I really hope that there's going to be new people who are watching this, or now or later on YouTube, like new people signing up to our groups and our discussions and our organizations because they're curious or because we've had a whole lot of publicity lately. And I think, I know this is like a radical feminist thing, but I think we need to speak to those people. You know, we've been saying that our view is the majority view. It's just that people don't know. They're not informed. Well, let's inform them, I reckon. Like less references without explanations and more more explaining and more plain language. Yeah, let's inform them. I've been out and proud about my politics for less than a month, and I've lost friends with people in my. I've lost friends. People in my community have accused me of being transphobic, right wing, Nazi aligned. All I've got to say to people like that is bring it on. Like, this is the hill I will die on. I will go to jail for this cause. Like, I would be willing to, you know, and I hope not, but I do believe this will be a fight of decades, and I'm in. Women have to fight tooth and nail for our freedom of speech, our freedom of meaning, because the hate speech and vilification laws are making women's speech illegal. True and correct speech about sex, illegal. I believe the ACT Human Rights Commission ruled that it's not always vilification to call a man if he doesn't identify as such. Well, thanks very much. It's really generous, but it should never be illegal to tell the truth, not about anything, and especially not about something so politically important because of sexism. And if we lose our freedom of speech and of meaning, we lose our ability to meaningfully discuss, inform, and fight this misogynistic and homophobic ideology. About a year and a half ago, I had some really big changes in my life that caused me to take stock of everything and ask some pretty serious questions about what was most important to me. And really, the answer immediately was women. And I wasn't really sure what to do with that answer. I'm reminded of a video I saw of Leah Keith, who I love, talking about when she was younger, walking around saying, "Are you for women's lib? Are you for women's lib?" All this crap about being on the wrong side of history. I tell you what, in 50 years' time, when they look back at this period in history, which group is going to be seen as the women's movement? The one that's fighting to take away women's rights to single-sex spaces and recognition as a sex in law? No, that's not the women's movement. That's the men's rights movement. If you're championing men's rights to invade female spaces and break female boundaries, you're championing the men's rights movement, and you are anti-woman. So that's really the question that I want to ask people who may end up seeing this. Are you for women's lib? Do you support the women's movement? Are you with us? Joyce Stevens wrote this piece for International Women's Day in 1975, and I'd like to read it out with a couple of additions. Because women's work is never done, and underpaid or unpaid or boring and repetitious, and we're the first to get the sack, and what we look like is more important than what we do, and if we get raped, it's our fault, and if we get bashed, we must have provoked it, and if we raise our voices, we're nagging bitches, and if we enjoy sex, we're nymphos, and if we don't, we're frigid, and if we love women, it's because we can't get a real man, and if we ask our doctor too many questions, we're neurotic and or pushy, and if we expect community care for children, we're selfish, and if we stand up for our rights, we're aggressive and unfeminine, and if we don't, we're typical weak females, and if we want to get married, we're out to trap a man, and if we don't, we're unnatural, and because we still can't get adequate, safe contraception, but men can walk on the moon, and if we can't cope or don't want a pregnancy, we're made to feel guilty about abortion. And I would add, if we gather in peaceful assembly to speak about our sex-based rights, or even just to listen, we're slandered as Nazis. And if we continue nonetheless to bring our voices to the public square, we're assaulted by state-sanctioned mobs. And for lots and lots of other reasons, we are part of the women's liberation movement. Join us. That's it.